Well, it is Thursday. It is January 9th, and look at us. We are all on remote tonight. This is the DLLS Dallas Stars podcast pregame show. We're going to talk all about the details actually, we just got started, so we don't have to do that little pause and then go. We're here alongside, you ready? Sean Shapiro, Sam Nessler, and
You got it wrong.
over there, it's Craig Ludwig, who is near an open flame, but I'm assured he's safe. I'm Owen Newkirk. Our producer, John Anderson, is off the screen, but still very much here and listening, and he's also in our hearts. There he is. So let's get right to it. Sam, you are on location at Wells Fargo Center in Philadelphia. How's the digs? How's your view tonight?
It's good. First of all, I love Philly. I used to drive by here all the time, and one of my favorite parts when I drove here going from New Jersey was the fact that all of their sports arenas and stadiums are in like the same parking lot. You pull into one of them, and you're in all three. You got the baseball, football, and hockey all right next to each other. Basketball, obviously, in the same building as hockey. So it's a really cool place where you can kind of just, if there's a game, you go to Xfinity Live or you go across the street, and it's popping. You got people everywhere. I mean, I'm sure they have times when both teams are playing, so it's a really cool environment out here. The view is great up here. We're pretty high up here. I think I need to buckle myself in to make sure I don't fall down, but it's a great time, and they got the music bumping.
The big news of the day, and there's a couple of lineup things. First is the update status on Ilya Lyubushkin, who left Tuesday's game in New York City, second period with an upper body injury, but it sounds like it's not as bad as it could have been.
No, yeah, it didn't seem like any concern for Pete DeBoer. Lyubushkin skated this morning in morning skate. He was a full participant. There was no easing him in or anything like that. It looked like he was holding his head after taking the hard hit in the second period. Didn't play over a second half of the game in New York. So it's really good news for Dallas because they are already pretty thin on the back end here. So it's very good news to have him in here. It looks like he's going to go right back to playing on the right side of Miro Hastings. That's good news all around.
The other lineup news is goaltending. Casey DeSmith gets the start in goal. Matt Dumba back in and Brendan Smith out. What were the vibes at morning skate when they were talking about this today?
Well, Casey DeSmith, second start in, I think, 4 games, right? So that's kind of unheard of for the way this team's been going. Jake Ottinger's been starting pretty much every game. He was good against Buffalo on New Year's Eve, stopped 23 of 25, I believe, in the win against the Sabres. So good for him. He's excited. He was honestly more concerned about the pipes freezing back at his house in Dallas than he was about the game. He's calm, cool, and collected. He's ready to go tonight. For Dumba, it's an interesting thing with the defense because neither one of them is really doing enough to stay in. It's almost like give Brendan Smith a game, and he was okay in New York. He played about 14 minutes. Was +1, but at times the game looked a little fast for him. Looked like he was reaching and trying to keep up with some of the forecheck from the Rangers. But then Dumba comes in and he hasn't done a whole lot either. He still has fewer points than Brendan Smith, and he's played about 8 more games and was brought in here really to bring offense. And I know he's had injuries. I know he's had some scratches, but the fact that he has 1 assist through 20-something games really is not a good sign. So it's another chance for him tonight. He's going to play probably with Thomas Harley, so he's got a chance to push him off. Someone's got to take this role because we're getting closer and closer to that March deadline, and these guys are not grabbing it right now and really solidifying the spot for him.
All right, Sam, one last thing for you. We had injury updates for Mason Marchment and Tyler Seguin. Pete DeBoer said on the ticket yesterday afternoon when he was on with the hard line, Marchment had fractures in both his nose and facial bones. Did say that he did not believe it was the orbital bone, but he was given at least a 4-week estimate. And he said he's probably a week to 10 days into that. By your estimate, are we going to see him in January?
It's tough. I think the estimate would be right about that California trip, that West Coast trip before the 4 Nations break. So if he's feeling good and he's ready to go, sure, he'll play. But if he's anywhere questionable, they might just push it back past that break. It's a California trip against a couple of struggling teams, and it's about to have a 2-week break where he's going to be off. But for Pete, it was all the same stuff that you just said. It's lucky it wasn't an orbital bone. That's where it can get really serious and can extend the timeline. But he did say Marchment came around the team into the locker room out above Frisco before they flew out for this trip, and that was huge for the team to see him. Similar to Seguin being around the team, it was big for the team to see these guys. They're a big part of their leadership group and mean a lot to the team, both on and off the ice. So good for them to see him. Good for him to be around the team, and they're just hoping that everything goes smoothly in the recovery and he gets back when he gets back.
And then Tyler Seguin briefly.
Yeah, Tyler Seguin talked to Pete a little bit about it since we did see him in that game on right before we left for the trip here. he said he's been around the team a few times, and not only that, but Seguin really wants to be around the team. He keeps asking and making sure he can come whenever he can to the rink. He's obviously a massive part of this group. Something I've realized this season is he is even more important than I thought. I mean, both on and off the ice, Seguin is a huge, huge part of this team, and I think that a lot of people are understanding that now that he's not available in the lineup. Pete actually said he calls him every week to talk about what goes on. He says he has a really good pulse of what goes on in the room, the guys in the room, and he's a big part of the team. So that says a lot to me. The only other people I know that talk to coaches that much are Joe Pavelski. So the fact that he's calling Seguin to get updates and talk about what's going on, even when Seguin's away from the team, just shows how valuable is this team. And those two getting back, I know their timelines are very different, but man, do the Stars need one and then two of those guys back on this team.
Well, Sam, it's great to have you on the ground, on the scene. Don't fall out of the press box tonight. We'll talk to you post-game.
All right, boys. Enjoy the game.
All right. That's Sam Nestler live from Wells Fargo Center as we play a little, where's the ball under the hat? All right. Luds, when you hear it's not the orbital bone for Mason Marchment, does that give you any positive thoughts?
Yeah, it's a lot better than a broken orbital. I mean, the orbital bone, becomes a touchy place because it's got to do with your eye, and your eye can drop down in the socket. And I went through that a long time ago. So, what I love about, Marchment is it's the second time and he keeps going there. He took one before, didn't get hurt, fortunately, in the first one. But he keeps on going there. I don't think he's the kind of guy that's going to change his game regardless of the injury right now. But, they're not going to let him come back until he's completely healed. Again, there's time, and I don't think this is a team that's got to rush guys back into the lineup if they're not as close to 100%. Because, when you start getting down that stretch somewhere around the 60-game mark is when you want to get everybody in there as healthy as they possibly can be.
And Sean, look, the idea that Marchment needed surgery means that there's something. Again, I'm not a doctor, but it means something was displaced, right? Usually if you break a bone and it's in place, it just has to heal. You leave it alone. It was a pretty gruesome injury that Marchment suffered, that puck to the face.
Yeah. And it's also one of those where, like, when we look at the timing of this, and you and I were talking about this earlier today, where so often when it comes to facial stuff, right? Like, it's hockey players, they put on the bubble or they put on the cage and they play through it, right? So this is kind of gives you an indication of how serious this is, right? We saw Tom Wilson famously. There was the clip of Tom Wilson with his face pretty massive, and he just kept playing through with the bubble and everything. So that gives a good idea of kind of the scale of what Marchment is dealing with. And that's kind of one of the things I'm fascinated is to see the long-term build on this. And I'm sure Luds would have a better feel than I would on this. I'm fascinated to see the timing of at what point can Marchment come back where he can't do any more damage to it. And obviously we're not doctors and we don't have the medical records in front of us, but I'm sure knowing him, he's going to want to be able to get back out there as soon as possible, and probably will be back out there with either a shield or a cage when he can. But at what point is it like, okay, you can go back and you're not going to hurt the healing process if you get into a collision, because and things along those lines. And that's going to be the interesting thing for me to see with this and his kind of recovery, because I don't think his game will change. I think it will be when the Stars medical staff gives him the green light, because I think if Mason Marchment was allowed to, he would go play tomorrow.
Yeah, Sean, when you mentioned the shield or the cage, I would think that he'll opt for it, but there may be a decision there. If you wear the full cage, you can come back a little bit earlier, or less, maybe less chance of re-injuring it because you're completely covered up. So that would be my guess, and I'm sure he won't be happy with that anyway. And half these guys that wear the shield, they sit up here anyways. They don't do anything anyway. So my guess would be that he'd have to come back, knowing how. Again, if I'm that doctor, I'm his girlfriend, his wife, or parents, whatever. I'm like, put the cage on. You know what I mean? If you're gonna play, just put the cage on.
Yeah.
I know this is probably a conversation to carry over to one of our daily podcasts, but I just wonder, as we've seen state safety and protection evolve over the course of decades in the NHL, are we going to see cages or plastic visors, the full shield, not just the half, at some point being mandated in the league? Is it going to take 20 years, 30? I don't know. I just wonder if that might happen someday.
I'd say I hope not, but again, it's not about our generation anymore. My feeling was as soon as the half shield started to come into play, the sticks started to come up. I think that when we were playing, there was nobody playing with the shields on and things like that. And everybody was pretty good with their sticks. Yeah, there was the occasional one that happened. But now I think they're just careless a little bit more because they know they really don't have an opportunity, or shouldn't say opportunity, a chance of hurting somebody when they got the shield on. I think they can play a little bit more reckless. You don't expect it to happen. So it won't surprise me if it comes in, because again, with the neck guards and everything else that's coming along, and the Kevlar on the hands and the ankles, I think these kids, and I'm talking about the young kids now that are coming up, they're all coming up with all this stuff. So it's not going to be any big change for them if it comes in.
Yeah, I don't know about the timeline or anything like that, but I can't. There's a couple things that come to mind for me. The first one is I think amount of times, and I'm sure you called games like this when you're calling games for the Texas Stars. How often do you see that kid who just played 3 or 4 years of college hockey get his first game in the AHL, the first game he's gone without a cage, and that tends to be the guy who's running around a little bit more and has his stick up a little bit more because, frankly, you go watch a lot of college hockey like I do, the sticks are up a little bit more because there's no it's there, and
there's less consequences. I suppose.
There's less consequences and everything like that. So I don't know about the timeline and when and where and when this all goes in the long run, but it is something where you look at I also go back to one of the things that I just, from a much lesser level, that I randomly think about. Like, it's funny for me to watch this. Both of my kids do like learn to skate stuff right now. I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old right now, and they both wear just the bike helmet. Well, they're both wearing just like the bike helmet at the learn to skate, and then the one no longer has to because she's good enough getting around the ice. But the kids who are running into the boards, and the kids that aren't really worried about the safety of anyone else, is the kid who's wearing the full hockey helmet. Just it's funny to watch, where it's like my 4-year-old who's wearing the bike helmet understands, like, okay, I'm not going to run into other kids because I have to actually protect my face, where the other 4-year-old wearing the hockey.
We should have a long 15-minute segment conversation, because that leads to is it better to learn to skate with gear or without? We could go on.
That's a whole nother thing, but it's just that's something I couldn't help but think about, because you see it at the AHL level where guys all of a sudden turn pro, they take it off, and it's funny. It's not funny, but it's kind of weird. One of the weirdest setups from the cage perspective for me that I watch regularly is the under 18 and under 17 USA national team, based in Plymouth, Michigan here. They play all of their game. They use only the cages, right? They use cages for everything, all games or the bubble, and everyone else in the USHL is wearing the visor. And so you'll see sometimes where I've actually talked to some USHL coaches who they don't say it super publicly, but they'll point out that the kids who are playing for the NTTP that have the visor or have the full cage, they tend to be a little bit more flippant with their stick in the corner versus as opposed to.
It's a great word. I'm not sure if it's real, but it sounded great.
Yes, and so it's
was that flippant?
Yes. So
he is the experienced writer here, Luds.
Yes. Sounds good to me.
So yeah, yep.
Okay, let's talk about this game. First and foremost, let's talk about the Rookie of the Year Calder race, because there are two big candidates. Will go head-to-head for the first time, Logan Stankoven and matveimichkov. And Luds, Sean and I have been talking about, once a rookie gets kind of a tour of the league, the book starts to get written on him by opponents, whether it's the video coaches, assistants, head coach, pre-scouts. And both of these guys, first of all, Stankoven's not really in the Calder race at the moment. He can get hot and turn back into it, but he went from a great start to really, really cold. 22 games without a goal, 4 assists during that span. He's not really in the race. Michkov is second in rookie scoring, but he has only 1 goal in his last 12 games. Are these two guys starting to learn just how hard the NHL is to play every night?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, like you say, you make one lap around the league, and every team gets to know you. And again, with all social media and everything, everybody knows about everybody now. And it's not like it used to be. You had to play against somebody before you learned anything. But yeah, I mean, I think they know that Michkov is, this dangler. I mean, that's what he is, and he's highly skilled. And he's been hurt lately, and he's got a couple games that he's missed, and it seems like he's going to be back on track. And Torts even said this morning, he's back to where he is. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in the lineup tonight. So he's healthy enough to go. I think the guy that's really rushed onto the scene is Hudson, the kid in Montreal. So in my opinion, unfortunately, honestly, I don't think Logan's even in the conversation as of this point. When you look on what they're averaging, I think Michkov and Celebrini are somewhere around 3/4 of a point, per game. And so, well, Celebrini might even be more than that. He might be closer to a point per game, so I just think that in Logan's under a half or in that neighborhood. So I just think he's kind of slowly drifting away. And I don't think you say Michkov's gone, 12 games, you said? What's
12
Logan
games.
now?
Yep.
22, 23, somewhere
22.
in that neighborhood. Yeah. So my opinion is not that, and we said this right from the start. It is not going to affect the way that Logan's going to go about his business. He just needs to get on the score sheet in that first column. But I think the good news is for Dallas is that, he plays with a good group and they have the confidence in him. What really surprised me, and I didn't even know it until I started looking at all their stats, they're all in the minus category column. I didn't think Logan was there. I thought Logan would be, somewhere around a +8, 9. I didn't realize he was in the minus category, which, because he's still collecting points. But again, this team isn't scoring at the rate that they did last year.
Sean, the thing on Stankoven is that he is still generating scoring chances. He went from being cold to being snake bitten, but it's not as though he's not a factor. And we've talked about this on the show, whether it's our daily podcast or on our game broadcast.
Yeah,
he is still an effective player. And the fact that he has, 18 points versus Michkov's 29 is a factor for Calder trophy racing, but he's only a -1. He is a much better 200-foot player, I think, right now than Michkov is.
I mean, here's the reality. He's not a Calder candidate, and I'm going through it right now. Like, I was just looking it up, and I may or may not have a vote this year. I don't know if I do or not. But the fact of the matter is, I have a hard time putting him in the top 10, right? Like, it's Hudson, Michkov, Celebrini, Tipslikov, and for the Islanders is having a better year. Like
Siplikov.
Yeah, thank you. Gauthier. I mean, Gauthier has more points, has just as many points on a worse team, and is that a 0? Now I know plus minus isn't everything, but Gautier's having a better year by those standards. You look at we've been talking about how much Will Smith has been struggling this year, and he has just as many points as Stankoven in less games. And then you have Dustin Wolf, who's having a tremendous year in Calgary and goal. Like, for me, it's not even like to call Stankoven a Calder candidate. It was preseason hype. But
no, it was early season. He tore onto the opening 10 games or so. He was great,
and that was built off preseason hype too. Like,
sure,
it was preseason hype. Everyone said, So
hey, Sean, can you take me through the voting? So let's say you have a vote. So how do you go about it? I mean, you just strictly look at the points and that's it, or what?
I don't strictly look at the points. And so for me, the rookie of the year, the definition is the most. I think it's most proficient is what the terminology is. The most proficient player in their first year or qualifies as a rookie. Since obviously you have to. There's a couple different ways to qualify as a rookie. How I vote on things is I do it two ways. I mean, there's two ways I look at it. The first thing I do is I go through and I make my list when I'm filling my ballot out. And last time I had a ballot was 2 years ago. I didn't have one last year. When I go through and fill out the ballot, the first thing I do is I make my initial list. And I just do what do I think right now, my initial list. And then I make that. And then I go and research my own list. And then I go through and I look at some of the data. I look at the players. I remember what I saw firsthand. And then the other thing I do, and it's not something everyone does because it is my ballot, but the other thing I do is I have hockey scouts and coaches in the hockey world I trust that I reach out to, and I pick their brains on things too. Like that. Now that is how. There's no rule that says you have to how you go fill out your ballot, but I am a believer in. I see there's certain teams I see more of than others, and so that's kind of how I go through and do it. The points definitely become a entryway. I'm also a believer, Luds, just the other big thing for me, and this is a way how I view things, and I realize this is a little bit of a positional sway, but I believe it's much harder to be a rookie defenseman and have an impact than as a rookie forward. I am admittedly when I go and
I won't argue there.
Yeah, and I think that's something where, I argued heavily against that when I thought Miro Heiskanen in his rookie year got jobbed quite a bit. But I don't know. I'm not saying Miro should have won the Calder his rookie year, but I thought Miro was way lower on a lot of ballots than he should have been, because I'm a big believer in what he was doing as a rookie defenseman was very undervalued by many voters. So yeah, that's how I go through and look at it. There are a lot of voters who I know, for example, they won't say it. Everyone has a good answer, or they won't say it, but there's a lot of people who will just go to the stats site and be like, oh, well, here's the points, and then they'll do it.
No, I know you wouldn't. And you guys are both, I'm sure, familiar with Safe Sport USA.
Yeah, we have to do the course as the coach for our rec teams.
Yep.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, I get worn out on it, right? And so some of the things, they just change it a little bit, and then you have to watch the video.
Every time.
You have to watch it, and you have to answer the questions. You don't get so many questions right, you have to do the whole thing over again. I wish there was something like that forced people to watch these guys play. Yeah. Whether it's 5 games, 10 games, I don't even know what the number is, but and they can't move on until they actually watch these guys play in games, because I mean, if you're on the East Coast and you got 3 guys, and vice versa, and all of a sudden you're staying up till 3 o'clock in the morning, it's hard to do that. So my opinion is they probably just go through all the stats, and because then I would think Logan would be in the conversation regardless. When you see how Stankoven plays and how he goes about his job, it isn't at just one end of the ring.
It's 100%. Yeah.
Let me throw this at both of you. William W. Williams in the chat just now said, so what if Logan gets hot with points later? Does it put him back in the Calder conversation?
Can.
If he has 10 points in his next 15 games and gets within 1 or 2 of Celebrini, Michkov, and Hudson, is he back in that conversation?
I think, of course, but what happens if those other guys stay on the same pace there?
Yeah, fair.
Which isn't right. I don't think it's right.
No, and
I think you got to look at the whole body of work that the players do. And I think some of the guys that we're talking about, for me, they play in 1/3 of the rink. That's where they do their work, is in 1/3 of the rink. Logan does it in all 3 zones.
And the other thing about whole body of work people have to remember, too, and this goes back to the year that Kaprizov won the Calder against Jason Robertson. There was a big thing of like, oh, well, look how strong Jason Robertson finished the season versus how Kaprizov did. Using that terminology, whole body of work again, I am a big believer in success and being the best, most proficient rookie. If you can play at that level from game 1 through 82, that means a lot to me. Like you obviously take into account if a guy improves and everything like that. But for me, proficiency and being the top rookie and everything like that, it's not just, who finished strong. It's also, it also comes into play of who's been able to show that they were ready and attacked things right away from the beginning. I give credit to that, because that's why, like, when it came to Robertson versus Kaprizov, I voted for Kaprizov, because Kaprizov, you know what? He was the most proficient rookie. Robertson did have a better push, and he kind of took more of that conversation at the end. But you can't just say, well, game 1 through 20 don't matter. And that would also be my argument, Luds, if someone asked me about Logan Stankoven, I'd say, well, look what he's done all year throughout in his game too. It's not just
And I would also say, I wish there was an anonymous way to ask the coaches in the league, here's your top 3 or your top 2. Which guy would you rather have on your team? And let them take that into account. It'll never happen. But I can tell you there's going to be a lot of guys that would write like a player that plays at both ends and plays at that pace that, Logan does versus maybe a one-dimensional guy.
The one good thing that has happened with the voting on this and where it's gone is it has been, I think it's been 4 or 5 years now that all the ballots are made public. And so that if you have a bad ballot, it will be out there and you will be found by the rest of the world. And I think that has been a good step. It's
called accountability for voters, and that's important.
And I thought it was called chastise them.
That too. Mm-hmm. All right. Hey, guys, this has turned into a really fascinating conversation about the Calder, but there is a game tonight. So in 5 minutes, let's do a little bit of a lightning preview. Luddy, it starts with who's hot for the Dallas Stars. We take a look at the lineups, and the 3 names that stand out to me right now, amongst many, as Dallas has won 5 in a row. And John, go ahead and throw the lines out. It's Jamie Benn, it's Matt Duchene, both on point streaks and of 3 games, and then Thomas Harley, 4 points his last 2 games, an overtime goal and an overtime assist. Not to mention, Maverick Bourque had his best game in a while. There's a lot going on for the Stars here, and they've been winning hockey games at the regular.
Well, maybe we'll see Harley in the first group on the power play. I just thought I'd throw that out there. You know what? I'll tell you what. I'd throw Robo in there too. I mean, I think Robertson's been really good lately, and I think we're seeing him get to the net. It seems like he's got a different gear right now, but I think that all comes with offensive, production and feeling good about himself. So I don't disagree with the other ones, but I think Robo's got to be in that same grouping.
Sean, do you like this DeSmith decision tonight to start, considering that you have a back-to-back in Montreal and Ottawa where you're going to need both? It looks like we're almost going to get an every other game rotation here, because then it sets up possibly, I'm assuming, Ottinger, Montreal, then DeSmith against Ottawa. I'm just looking at the calendar off to my right. Toronto, I'm guessing Ottinger, then Montreal at home. Then you have a back-to-back at Colorado, home versus Detroit. It's going to come fast and furious here. You need both to play.
Yeah, I think this is something I've been a little bit vocal that I feel like they should have hopped on this train a little bit earlier on things when it just comes to Jake's workload and everything like that. So I have no issue with this at all. I think I honestly thought Ottinger was going to play just because of how they've been doing things, and I would have disagreed with it because they're overworking him. But I'm happy they made the decision to play DeSmith tonight, because you got to get the rotation going. You got to make sure that Jake's body isn't hitting that wall like it has in the past. We've consistently seen in the postseason.
Okay, let me ask you this then, Sean. I don't know if you guys had a chance to hear Connor Hellebuck this morning speaking at all, but he was really talking a lot about rhythm. Like, he likes to get into rhythm. He goes, there's days I need off. I know I need him off because I need to work on one thing or this or that, whatever it may be. And he goes, there's days where I just need to get away. But he goes, what's most important to me is being in a rhythm. So how do you go about getting a goaltender, your goalie, your number one guy, in that rhythm if you're going to just go every other game?
Well, the Stars' schedule, I think it's easy. That this team is literally playing every other. They're playing every other day, it feels like, for the rest of the season. So, I think this year there's no issue with that at all, because this team, after what is it? It feels like it's a game every 2.5 days technically, or whatever, after the Finland trip. So I don't think there's any issue in developing rhythm, because there's no breaks in the schedule beyond the Four Nations. And by the way,
are you considering rhythm every other game? Play every other game then?
I would think
so. And again, what Hellebuck was talking about, he likes to play 4 or 5 games in a row, and that's how he's talking about rhythm.
Yeah.
Is it okay to play every other game, and that's good enough rhythm?
I think so. I mean, I would argue it is, and that's something that I think it's, from a goaltending perspective, it's more so when you get below that line of certain things where things start to become more difficult, because the things you can't emulate in practice, and it's why sometimes you see a goalie step into a game and struggle who is coming back from injury or has been a backup that hasn't played in a little bit, there's nothing in practice where the team goes full speed of bodies bumping the net, fighting through those battles to pick those pucks up from the point. You can face all the 2-on-0s, all the breakaways. You can get all of that stuff in practice, but it's the in-game situation, plays out of the corner where the opponent is trying to bank the puck off the back of your head and into the net. Those things that you can't develop in practice, because frankly your team doesn't practice at game speed, and the NHL is such a not practice league, especially we know how much the Stars practice, right? So I think there's enough time with what the Stars have rhythm-wise, and I also honestly I think it's better. This works out better for DeSmith as well to be better, because I think we've seen times where DeSmith has looked a little rough, like early in those games where he comes in and he looks a little sloppy and everything. I think part of that is he's not in rhythm, and so if you can get them both going, I think that pushes both of them. And I know Jake Ottinger's the number one guy, and he's not going anywhere, but a little competition is never going to hurt anything. That's the other thing too for me.
Okay, guys, let's talk about the Flyers real quick in a minute or so. The forwards.
Speaking of rhythm, they have 3 AHL level goalies that are all terrible.
Well, we're going to toss that to you in a second, but look at this group. It looks like Forster, Cates, and Brink might actually be their top line tonight. They did a different order at morning skate than they did, for whatever that matters. They're hot. it's the Konechny. Travis Konechny is leading them in points. He has 45 on the season and in goals and assists. But the two hottest players right now are Noah Cates, assists in 4 straight, points in 9 of his last 10. And Tyson Forster has 9 points in 10 games. 6 of those are goals. And this is a team that is going through a little bit, Luds, of an up and down. And then, Sean, we'll toss to you about the 3 goalie rotation. They lost to the Maple Leafs on Tuesday night. They're winless in 3, and they have been struggling 3-7-1 in their last 11 games.
Well, I listened to John Tortorella's post-game or post-practice presser this morning, 20 minutes, and I'm telling you, he's great. He opens up, he talks about, but he couldn't talk enough about Cates. And they actually want him to risk more at risk. And they feel that he hasn't broken out yet. They think he's unbelievable. He's a +8 on this team. There's only 2 forwards that are plus and 2 defensemen that are plus. And the other one is Hathaway. So Cates and Hathaway, the only 2 guys that are plus on this team. And he talked about these guys getting in there. He says his way of busting out now is he doesn't just put pucks in. He keeps the puck, makes somebody come and take away from him. But he wants to take more of a risky game. So I think they're going to get a lot more minutes tonight. I think whether you can work on these guys, they're not scoring a ton of goals. And Sean, he's going to talk about the goaltending. And they talked about Urson a bit tonight. But what they want to play, he said, they want to play with the 3 guys high in the offensive zone. So the 2 defensemen, the forward, they figure they can get more offense from there. And they also, the reason you do that is to kind of help out the goalie at the other end of the rink and don't give up any outnumbered rushes.
So, Sean, Samuel Urson gets the start tonight, but he's been dealing with a lower body injury, hasn't played since New Year's Eve. He's 3-1 in his last 4, but he got pulled in that one loss. On December 23rd, he gave up 5 goals on 14 shots through 2 periods against the Pittsburgh Penguins. What's going on with Urson, Fedotov, and Kolosov?
Yeah, it's a mess. We'll just call it what it is. It's a mess. They've got 3 goalies who are playing at effectively a minor league AHL level, and a bunch of them that are refused, and 2 that effectively refuse to go there. I mean, Kolosov, people may remember Kolosov was played in the KHL last year, wanted to come over. The Flyers wanted to get him over to North America this year, and he said he wouldn't go to the AHL. And he's literally been, he through his agent and him have basically said, hey, I'm a NHL goalie or a KHL goalie, not an AHL goalie. And, well, you know what? He's got an .870 save percentage, 30 points. Like, league average in the NHL is the lowest it's been since Lud's played right now. It's 900. It's the lowest it's been since Lud's played in the league. And this guy is 30 points below league average and is clearly not an NHL goalie. Fedotov has been not great either. Fedotov has been not very good either. And Harrison hasn't been good. I mean, it's a mess. And I know Harrison's first one coming back from injury. He's a guy where we talked about that rhythm earlier. I would try to get to him early. When it comes to the Flyers, and goaltending is always going to be and as you well know, the goaltending in Philadelphia is always going to lead columns and sports radio topics. And this is probably one of the worst groups they've ever had the opportunity to talk about. So I'm sure it's a field day right now.
I'd just like to point out before we sign off, because the game is about to start, a bunch of our viewers in the chat has said that the Flaming Pillar should be moved into the DLS studios. They love the Zen. Ardell said Flaming Pillar, a fish tank, a glass of milk, Lud's Zen mode. And then JT said Lud's, actually no, it was Trevor got in and said, cuddle me, Lud's, it's cold outside. Thank you for showing your breath there. I saw it. It's Craig Ludwig, Sean Shapiro, Sam Nestler from Wells Fargo Center. I'm Owen Newkirk, and our producer, John Anderson. We will be here for the post-game show, and it'll be fascinating because unlike usual where Luddy and I and maybe Sam are talking and watching the game in the same room, we're all separated. So we will have fresh opinions right after the game here on DLLS. Thanks for joining us.
I believe that they are going to crush these guys tonight.
We all silly like the mayor.